During a violent storm, a biker stops to help a soaked girl at a lonely bus stop. But when he brings her home, he notices a letter on the fridge, one written in his own handwriting from over a decade earlier. How do you react when your past reaches out before you realize you're holding its hand? The storm rolled in fast, swallowing the late afternoon light and turning the highway into a sheet of shifting silver. Reed Nash leaned forward on his bike, squinting through the downpour as wipers from cars ahead fought a losing battle. He wasn't planning to stop until he reached his usual diner. A plate of chili and a quiet booth sounded good enough, but something on the right shoulder caught his attention. A girl, small, still as a post, standing at a bus stop that looked one good gust away from collapsing. Reed eased off the throttle. Most kids would have been flinching, shivering, pacing, something. But this one was holding a broken umbrella sideways, as if blocking the rain wasn't the point anymore. Her soaked hoodie clung to her arms. Her jeans were plastered to her legs. The storm was hammering her, and she just took it. Reed pulled over, engine rumbling low. She turned her head slightly, not startled, just acknowledging him the way someone acknowledges a distant sound. "You waiting for a bus?" he asked, lifting his visor. She nodded. "It's late." Reed glanced at the empty road. No bus was coming through this mess for at least an hour, maybe longer. "You got somewhere safe to be? Home's not far. I can tell you the way," she said, voice steady but soft. "I promise I'm not trouble." He almost smiled. She looked 13 at most, thin as a sapling, backpack hanging off one shoulder like it weighed more than she did. "Name? Maya. I'm Reed." He held out the spare helmet he kept strapped to the back of his bike. "You want to ride out of this storm?" She hesitated, not with fear, with calculation. Then she nodded, polite as someone raised to never impose. She slipped the helmet on, tightening the strap carefully. When she climbed behind him, she balanced her school bag between them, mindful of every inch of space. He pulled onto the road. Maya's directions were soft and precise. Left after the bowling alley, straight past the lumber yard, then 2 more blocks. She wasn't guessing, she'd memorized the route. They passed rows of aging houses, their porches lined with wind chimes and plastic chairs. This wasn't a dangerous neighborhood, just one where people patched their roofs themselves and stretched paychecks until they snapped. When Reed parked in front of a weather-beaten yellow house, Maya tapped his shoulder. "You can meet my grandma if you want. She gets nervous when I talk to strangers." Reed didn't usually step inside people's homes, but something in the way she said it, careful, practiced, nudged him past his usual boundaries. The front door cracked open before they reached it. Dolores appeared, a woman in her 70s with sharp eyes softened by years of watching over others. Her gray hair was pulled into a loose bun, and her sweater had been mended more than once. "Maya?" she asked, scanning her granddaughter from head to toe. Then her attention shifted to Reed. Not fear, not distrust, just a measured readiness to understand him. "She got caught in the storm," Reed said. "I was passing through." Dolores's eyes softened, not with relief, but with the recognition of someone who had shown up when it mattered. "Thank you for bringing her home. Come in, please, unless you're trying to rust out that jacket of yours." Inside, the house smelled of cinnamon tea and old wood warmed by time. Faded photographs lined the hallway. Birthdays, school plays, sunsets on forgotten beaches. Reed noticed a stack of letters tucked neatly into a tin on the counter, a pile of unopened bills half slid under a placemat, and a small toolbox in the corner that looked like it had seen decades of service. Maya rushed to change out of her soaked clothes, leaving a trail of damp footprints. Dolores set a kettle on the stove and motioned for Reed to sit. "You ride in weather like this often?" she asked. "Not if I can help it." "You have that look," she said gently. "Someone who keeps moving unless something makes them stop." Reed didn't answer. He didn't have to. She'd already read the truth on his face. Maya returned wearing a dry hoodie that hung too big on her. She handed Reed a towel for his hands, embarrassed by the gesture but earnest. He accepted it with a nod. As they settled around the small kitchen table, Reed's attention drifted, not intentionally, just following habit. He scanned the room the way a man does when he's spent years learning to read danger, need, or both. That's when he saw it. A laminated piece of paper on the fridge, held by a magnet shaped like a kitten. Yellowed edges. Handwritten. Preserved like a family keepsake. He leaned forward slightly. The handwriting pulled the breath out of him. His chest tightened. His hands went still on the table. Because the letter wasn't just familiar. It was his. Written 12 years ago. Back when he was a raw, wide-eyed army medic on leave, barely older than a kid himself. And the room suddenly felt too quiet, too small, as if the storm outside had followed him in and settled behind his ribs. Reed didn't speak, but Dolores saw his reaction, and her expression shifted, just enough to say she'd been waiting a very long time for this moment to find its way home. Reed couldn't tear his eyes from the fridge. His handwriting, the slanted R, the way he looped his Y, there was no mistaking it. Dolores followed his gaze, her expression shifting from polite neutrality to something deeper, almost fragile. "You recognize it," she said quietly. Reed swallowed, throat dry. "Where'd you get that?" Dolores didn't answer at first. She walked to the fridge, lifted the magnet, and removed the laminated sheet with a careful reverence that suggested it had been handled hundreds of times. She set it on the table between them. Maya glanced between them, sensing something important but unsure of her place in it. "I've only shown this to a few people," Dolores said. "But I think you deserve to know why it's there." Reed stared at the letter. The thank you note. His own words written shakily after hours of smoke clearing from his lungs. He remembered sitting on the curb, trembling from adrenaline, writing it because he didn't know what else to leave behind. He'd slipped it under the broken door frame before disappearing into the night. A young army medic on leave, drifting with more hurt than hope. "You kept it," Reed murmured. Dolores breathed out slowly. "It kept us." Maya leaned forward. "Grandma tells me the story sometimes. About the night the house burned down." Reed felt the old memory unearth itself. The shrill scream cutting through the dark, the flicker of flames behind a window, a woman on the ground coughing, an infant crying. His arms carrying them out, one by one, before neighbors even woke. The fleeting image of a terrified toddler gripping his dog tag as he tried to calm her. And then, the shame he lived with later, the feeling that one good act didn't erase the weight he carried from military years that ended with too many losses. "I didn't think anyone would ever read it," Reed said, still staring at the paper. Dolores hesitated, then motioned to Maya. "Sweetheart, bring the book." The girl disappeared down the hall and returned with a thick photo album wrapped in tape to keep the binding from splitting. She placed it gently in front of Reed. "We kept everything from that night," Dolores said. Reed opened the album. On the first page was a faded photograph of the burned house, edges curled from heat. Next to it was a crayon drawing, scribbled lines forming the shape of a man with a big jacket and a crooked smile. A toddler's attempt at remembering someone who'd comforted her. "That's you," Maya said with certainty. "Grandma said the man who saved us drew that to help me stop crying." Reed blinked, startled. The doodle was familiar. He used to sketch faces on napkins for scared kids during emergencies. Something simple to hold on to. He turned the page. An old army badge, mounted under clear tape. One he must have lost in the chaos. Then a tiny piece of metal, the corner of a dog tag, darkened by soot. "You were young," Dolores said gently. "Barely older than my son had been. You pulled us from the fire, called for help, then vanished before we even knew your name. You wrote that letter. I laminated it so it wouldn't fall apart. And I told Maya about you as she grew up. About the stranger who showed up when everything went wrong." Reed closed the album and rubbed his temples. He felt exposed, like someone had turned him inside out. "I just did what I could. I never thought it would mean anything beyond that night." Maya watched him carefully, as though memorizing this version of him, the one caught off guard, unsure, human. "Grandma says kindness leaves a trail, even if the person doesn't see where it leads." Reed met her gaze. There was no admiration, no pedestal, just sincerity, that somehow felt heavier. "Why didn't you say something earlier?" he asked Dolores. I didn't want to push you away, she admitted. You looked like a man who still carries things. Heavy things. I figured if you were meant to know, the moment would reveal itself. Silence settled over the kitchen. Not awkward, reflective. Rain tapped the windows in softer rhythm now, as though the storm outside had settled into a listening hush. Reed finally exhaled. I didn't save many people, he said, voice low. And I didn't always get there in time. I think that night, I tried to forget all of it. Dolores's eyes softened. Some things aren't meant to be forgotten. Maya reached for a mug of tea and slid it toward him. You don't have to say anything else. But you can come by again. If you want. Reed froze. The offer was so casual, so open, that he felt his breath catch. He'd spent years drifting from place to place, half convinced he wasn't meant to belong anywhere for long. Hearing the invitation felt like someone had cracked open a door he didn't know he'd been knocking on. Before he could answer, Dolores added, We're not asking for anything. Just, if you feel like visiting, the kettle's usually on. Reed stared at the letter one more time, the proof of a life he'd touched without knowing. A life that had grown, endured, and somehow found its way back to him. Yeah, he said quietly. I think I'd like that. Dolores smiled. And when Reed stepped outside later, the storm had eased into a soft drizzle, the kind that makes the air smell like renewal. He sat on his bike a long moment before starting the engine, looking back at the small yellow house with its warm light spilling through the curtains. He'd walked into that home as a stranger. He was leaving as someone remembered, and that changed everything. Reed went back the following Friday. He told himself it was just to return the borrowed towel, but he knew better. Something about that house, its worn floors, the cinnamon smell, the quiet steadiness of Dolores and the bright watchfulness of Maya, had settled under his skin. When he arrived, Maya was outside wrestling with a bike that looked like it had survived a small war. The back wheel wobbled. The chain was rusted stiff. You ride that thing? Reed asked, parking his motorcycle beside her. It gets me to school, she said, tapping the frame as if encouraging it. Most days. Not today. Reed crouched down, lifting the bike to inspect the damage. Maya hovered nearby, unsure whether she should help or not. This chain's older than I am, he muttered. That's not even possible, Maya said, cracking a smile. He pulled out a small tool pouch from his saddlebag. Fixing things was second nature, something the army had ingrained in him long before he grew into the man who preferred silence over explanation. As he worked, Maya sat on the steps, kicking her shoes lightly against the wood. You like helping people, she said suddenly. Reed paused, hands still on the bike. I don't know if that's what you call it. Grandma does. Maya looked down. She says people who show up twice usually show up again. Before Reed could answer, the screen door creaked open. Dolores stepped out, holding a folded grocery list and trying to hide the tremor in her hand. Reed noticed instantly. Need help? He asked. Dolores hesitated. She always hesitated. Pride was stitched into her bones. If you're not busy. I'm here, Reed said simply. Inside, the kitchen felt warmer than he remembered. A pot simmered on the stove. Papers were spread across the counter. Appointment cards, scribbled notes, medication instructions. Dolores moved with deliberate precision, trying not to let either of them see how much effort each motion cost. Doctor visit today? Reed asked gently. Just the doctor reminding me I can't outrun my own body. But there was a softness in her voice that betrayed how much she was minimizing. Maya carried a stack of textbooks to the table with the carefulness of someone used to hiding strain. Reed watched her bite her lip as she sat, rubbing her wrist after placing the heavy books down. You're in advanced classes? He asked. Trying, she said. I miss school a lot for, stuff. Reed did know. The house needed tending. Dolores needed tending. And Maya was doing everything she could to keep their worlds stitched together. When Dolores stepped out to take a phone call, Reed lowered his voice. You doing all this alone? Maya shrugged. It's just what needs doing. I got used to it. She tapped her pencil on the table. Grandma doesn't want me working after school. She says kids should be kids. But kids don't pay for groceries. There was no bitterness in her tone. Just fact. Reed had seen soldiers her age forced into impossible roles, but hearing it from a 13-year-old at a kitchen table hit differently. Reed glanced at the bike leaning against the porch rail outside, the patched backpack, the too big hoodie she wore every time, the careful way she studied him, as if trying to predict whether he'd stay or fade away like other adults had. "Has anyone at school noticed?" he asked. "Some teachers," she admitted. "One told me I'm falling behind. Another says I'm distracted. They don't really ask why. I guess they think I don't want to try." Reed felt something twist in his chest. He'd met soldiers like that, carrying weight no one saw, blamed for struggles no one understood. Dolores returned, leaning a little more heavily on the doorframe. "I'm sorry," she said. "Doctor ran late with another patient." "You got the results?" Reed asked. She nodded, avoiding his eyes. "Nothing we can't manage." But Reed saw the folded paper in her hand. He saw how tightly she gripped it. He saw fear, quiet, controlled, crouching behind resolve. Later, while Dolores rested on the living room couch, Maya showed Reed a drawer filled with bills she tried to organize by due date. "She doesn't want me seeing these," she whispered. "But I have to, just in case." Reed knelt beside her. "Maya, you shouldn't have to plan for emergencies alone." She looked at him with an honesty that stopped him cold. Who else is going to do it? He didn't have an answer that wouldn't break her heart. That evening, he washed dishes while Dolores cooked. It wasn't planned. He just stepped in when he saw her hands shaking as she tried to hold a plate steady. She didn't refuse his help. Maybe she was too tired. Maybe she was too relieved. "You don't have to keep coming back," she murmured. "I know," Reed said. "That's not why I'm here." She looked up. The gratitude in her eyes didn't shine. It steadied. "You've changed the air in this house, Reed. It's lighter with you in it." Reed wasn't sure what she meant until he saw Maya in the doorway, watching them with a small, unconcealed smile. Peace, hope, something like belonging. By the time Reed left, evening had settled in, soft and cool. Maya ran out with the freshly repaired bike, rolling it proudly beside him. "It works now," she said. "Better than before." Reed handed her a small reflector light he'd attached. "Be visible on the road. Drivers don't always look." Maya nodded. "Will you come next Friday?" The question carried no pressure, just hope. Reed felt it strike deeper than he expected. "Yeah," he said. "I will." Maya beamed. Dolores waved from the porch, leaning against the railing. As Reed rode away, he didn't feel the familiar pull of leaving. Instead, he felt something settling, something he hadn't let himself feel in years. Roots. Not the kind that trap you, the kind that hold you steady. He didn't yet know what it would cost. He didn't yet know what they would need from him. He only knew he was staying. Reed returned the next week with a quiet knot in his stomach. Something had been off the last time he visited. The tremor in Dolores's hand, the way she gripped the doctor's note, the way Maya's eyes followed her every step as if waiting for something to go wrong. He'd spent days replaying those details, trying to pretend he wasn't worried. But the truth was simple, he cared. Deeply. When he knocked, the door opened slower than usual. Dolores stood there, steadying herself on the frame. She managed a smile, thin but genuine. "You're right on time," she said. "Always try to be," Reed replied. Inside, he immediately noticed the difference. The house was quieter. The cinnamon smell lingered, but the pot on the stove wasn't simmering today. A stack of medical papers lay on the table, some highlighted, others marked with sticky notes. Maya sat beside them, posture stiff, her usual brightness dulled by exhaustion. The moment she saw Reed, her shoulders eased. Not dramatically, just enough to reveal how tightly she had been holding herself together. "Grandma needs more help now," she said softly. Dolores shot her a gentle look, but didn't contradict her. Reed pulled out a chair. "Talk to me." Dolores sat opposite him, folding her hands carefully so the tremor wouldn't show. The doctor says things are progressing faster than expected. My heart isn't working the way it used to. The tiredness isn't passing anymore. And the dizzy spells, they're harder to pretend away. Maya's voice trembled. She didn't tell me right away. I didn't want you scared, Dolores whispered. I've been scared for a while. I just didn't want you to see it. Maya said, barely audible. The air tightened around them, not with panic, but with truth settling between people who could no longer pretend. Reed leaned forward. What do you need? Dolores hesitated. Someone to keep an eye on her. Someone steady. I know you're not looking for responsibility. And we barely know each other. You know enough, Reed said. She blinked at the certainty in his tone. Maya looked at him, not with expectation, but with something more fragile, the hope she was afraid to articulate. The social worker came by this week, Maya said, just to ask questions, to see if we were coping. She mimicked the word with air quotes. They said if things get worse, someone might have to step in. Reed felt heat rise in his chest. Step in how? Placement, Dolores answered quietly. Temporary, they say. But we both know temporary can turn into long-term if you don't have anyone to fight for you. Maya dropped her gaze. I don't want to go anywhere. Reed didn't hesitate. You're not going anywhere. Dolores let out a shaky breath. Not relief, not despair, just the overwhelming mix of both. The rest of the afternoon unfolded with gentle realism. Reed fixed a loose cabinet door. Maya explained how she'd been taking on more chores. Dolores tried to pretend she wasn't watching Reed with gratitude she didn't want to make verbal. Eventually, Reed pulled out his phone. I know some folks who can help get things sorted. Repairs, errands, rides, whatever you need. Maya frowned. We can't afford. It's not about money, Reed said. It's about showing up. Later that evening, his motorcycle club arrived in a small convoy. 3 bikes rumbling up the street, drawing curious glances from neighbors. They didn't ask questions or make grand gestures. They just worked. One reattached loose shingles. Another repaired the porch railing. A third cleaned gutters without saying a word. Maya watched from the window, awe creeping across her face. Are they always like this? Not always, Reed admitted. But when it matters. Yeah. Dolores leaned beside her granddaughter. People talk about angels. They never expect them to arrive on motorcycles, she said softly. Inside, Reed replaced a light fixture and organized the medical papers into a neat folder, labeling dates and appointments. Maya helped, absorbing every step. Dolores rested in an armchair, watching the two of them move around her house like they'd always been there. As the sun dipped behind the rooftops, Maya sat across from Reed at the kitchen table. She reached into the same drawer that once held unpaid bills and pulled out the laminated letter. I want you to have it, she said. Reed shook his head. That's yours. Part of your story. It's part of yours too, Maya replied. And stories don't stay alive if they sit on fridges. He took it reluctantly, studying the faded ink, the uneven strokes of a much younger version of himself. The words felt heavier now, infused with everything that had happened since. The fire, the years, the reunion none of them had seen coming. Dolores spoke from the doorway. Kindness doesn't disappear, Reed. It circles back. Sometimes when we need it most. Reed exhaled slowly. I'm not good at big promises. No one's asking for those, she said. Just presence. Just truth. Maya reached for his hand. Will you stay in our lives? Not just today. Not just next Friday. Reed didn't need time to think. The answer had been growing in him long before she voiced the question. I'm not going anywhere. You two are stuck with me. Maya smiled, small, overwhelmed, real. Dolores closed her eyes, letting a weight lift off her shoulders. The house felt different then. Not fixed, not saved, but steadied, as if someone had anchored the foundation without making a sound. When Reed stepped outside at the end of the night, the porch light cast a warm glow across the rebuilt railing and freshly cleaned steps. He glanced back to see Maya and Dolores framed in the doorway, together, unbroken. He slipped the laminated letter into his jacket. a reminder that years ago he'd helped save a family, and now, without planning to, he'd become part of it. This story reminds us that kindness doesn't disappear. Even when we move on, it waits, grows, and sometimes returns when we need it most. If you were in Reed's place, discovering a forgotten act changed an entire family's life, what would you do next? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if the story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to embrace the journey for more heartfelt stories. See you in our next video.